So we are learning about search interfaces configuration today. And today we are going to focus on a handful of optional features in Primo V. Some of these have been in Primo for a while, like browse and newspaper search are familiar for folks who were on Primo Classic also. Some of them are fairly new, like collection discovery, and maybe you haven't had a chance to configure them on V. I think collection discovery is maybe 2, 3 years old now, actually, but we'll go through these search interfaces and the pieces for configuration. And then we're also going to go through how to configure the topic overview, which we saw before. And then I think really useful for a lot of libraries right now in the COVID period and, during this strange time, I think the resource recommender will be really useful. So I want to make sure we have time to visit that. Okay, so we're going to start with the browse search. So we saw browse search before. It can either be enabled or disabled in your view, and you can also choose which types of browse are available to your end users. You have options like author, title, series, call number, subject browse, and the subject browse options are based on standard subject headings, and you'll see a lot of them are pre-configured in the environment, like Library of Congress and National Library of Medicine, and quite a few other international vocabularies. If you have local authorities configured at your institution, name authorities or subject authorities, you can also select those for browsing and create a drop-down piece for them as well. Call number types, as you can see, you have your SUDOC, your UDC, NLM, Congress, Library of Congress, Dewey, generic, shelving control number, etc. So in terms of configuring this, for each configuration today, we'll have a slide that will show you the roles that you need to configure it. So you'll need to make sure you have the correct role. You'll need to enable it in the links area in the view. You'll need to determine which fields you are making available for browsing. And you'll need to ensure labels are correctly appearing, and this might come into play if you have, for example, multiple subject browses in play, and potentially learn more about the fields in the MARC that are used to generate the actual browse headings. So for this particular integration, you just need the discovery admin role. So you'll need to make sure that you have that, and likely you do because you're able to get into the discovery config. And okay, so let's start configuring browse search. So I am going to go into my configuration menu, and I'm going to start in discovery configuration, and I'm going to look at display configuration, configure views. And I'm going to choose my view. I have quite a few in this environment. You may have less. And so I'm in my view configuration, and we're going to go into the second tab, the links menu tab. And the first piece we'll need to see is to make sure that browse search is enabled here. So make sure that it's toggled on, and then you can decide where it appears in the links menu by raising it up or lowering it down with the sliders. And that's going to show where it appears up here in the top links menu. If you have more that are hidden, you can click on the ellipses. And so we're looking at browse search. And so this is what I have configured, and we see that we have two undifferentiated subjects here, so we'll need to do something about that. But we have our author, title, etc. We have some call numbers here also. So just to show some of the functionality of it, I'm going to do a browse search for Lauren Isley. This is the subject heading, the name authority that I'm going to choose, and there's 8 results for this author in this database, and we see that they are sorted by title alphabetically. So we see that there's a choice there in terms of sort. So in terms of configuration, you're in the links area, the links menu tab again here in the view configuration, and you've made sure that the browse search is turned on and it's in the place that you want it in the links menu. To configure browse, you'll go over to the row action and go into edit. And here you can actually make the decisions about what appears in your menu. So you have, here we've chosen author, title, etc. We have the two subject browses here. We see that the first one is Library of Congress, and the second is actually the National Library of Medicine. So that's the two subjects that we see. And then you can choose the call numbers. And we see for some of them, obviously, you need to choose a vocabulary. So for example, for authors, we have Library of Congress, and this is a local authority that was configured in this sandbox. So potentially you might be choosing local authorities if you have that set up. And then again, also we saw that the author browse was sorted by title A to Z. You can make other decisions about sorting. You can sort by date. Author doesn't really make sense since it is an author browse, but author might make sense in other browse types. So you would just toggle what you want on and then you would save. And in this case, we know that we have this issue with the labels where we have two subjects and they both appear as subject. So our user doesn't know which one they're browsing. So we want to make sure that we fix that. So I'm going to go into the discovery config, and I'm going to go under display configuration under labels. And I should have shown also that in the column, there was the subjects that we were looking at were subject.1 and subject.2. And that's part of the code, and that can be really useful for searching. So you can use that code to search the label tables to find the table that contains the labels you want to change. You can also use the description. My Alma is being extremely slow. So there's also a description where you can type in basically what you see in Primo V, and it will try and find the table where that text appears. So if you don't know the code, you can always search for the description, and you will likely be able to pick it up from there. But the code is just a little bit more exact. And in this case, I do know that the code is subject.1, and it pulls up just one table, browse search labels, which is exactly what we want to change. So we're going to go into edit here. And then we should be able to change the text of the subjects. So the column description here, this is actually the label that's appearing to the end user. So you can click into this and make edits to it, and then this will change what is appearing to your users once you save. So, oh my goodness, it's being so slow. Library of Congress, and then we know that the subject 2 was the NLM. So once we have that, now this is going to change what displays in that dropdown. So we can save this table. And it should be really quick, just like indexing. Once we refresh our Primo V view that we're working with. And you do get weird codes when you change some of the label tables, and they go away once it refreshes. But now we have Library of Congress subject and NLM subject, so we understand what we are browsing here, which subject we're browsing. And you can change the labels for any of these if necessary. And that's pretty much it for configuring browse. It's not so tough to configure. I will also mention, so if I click into any full record, this is the full record display. And we also had seen this before. This is the virtual browse. And here are the thumbnails are also pulled in here, and I can scroll around. You can configure that in the view also. So we're not in, let me get back into the view. Okay. So we're not in this time in the links menu. We're looking at the full record services because we're looking at when we pull up the full record, that's when you see the virtual browse. And then you have browse shelf right here. And if you go into the row actions into configure here, you have two choices. One is browse bibliographic headings that will include your ebooks, your electronic materials in here also, your local electronic materials. Or if you want to have a true shelf list with only your physical material, you can choose browse shelf listing, and that will only include your P items, your physical items. So you have those choices there. And now we are going to continue on to the next interface. We are going to look at newspaper search. So newspaper search gives patrons a way to access over 1 billion newspaper articles and news resources, and it uses a dedicated search screen for specifically for newspapers. This enhancement is supposed to help improve the discovery of scholarly content in Primo by potentially excluding news sources if you have newspaper search turned on from the main search, while enabling easier access to newspaper content in its dedicated search environment. So there are some caveats to think about before setting up newspaper search. So let me explain what will happen if you have this functionality turned on or off. So this top screenshot here is showing the CDI tab in your, if you were looking at an Alma collection, if you were activating it or editing it in the CDI tab, you would see this CDI information at the bottom. We looked at this in a previous session also. And there's this newspapers no, or newspapers yes, or newspapers yes, newspaper search only. Those are the three options that you'll see there. And this is relevant if you decide to turn newspaper search on. If you do not wish to use newspaper search and you don't have it activated in your environment, you will retrieve results from newspapers equals no and newspapers equals yes in your general CDI search. So these will be combined. Newspaper results will be mixed in with other CDI content, and you will not have access to CDI content that is marked yes, newspaper search only. I'll show also where you can download the CDI collections list that's been mentioned previously to see all of the CDI collections together in an Excel spreadsheet if that is helpful. And I'll show you how you can search in your own environment to see what collections you have activated that fall into these specific categories. So if you do want to turn on newspaper search and you have it activated, as I'll show in the next demo, you will have a dedicated newspaper search in your environment. Newspaper collections marked no will be retrieved in your regular CDI search. Collections marked yes and yes, newspaper search only will only appear now in the dedicated newspaper search. So you gain the content in yes, newspaper search only, and you remove this yes content from the general display and it moves into the newspaper search. So I'm sure you can already see that there are pros and cons to both decisions. The major con is that if you don't have newspaper search turned on, you are losing access or you're not, showing access to a specific CDI collections that are, yes, newspaper search only. So those will only appear if you have newspaper search turned on, and they will only appear in that dedicated newspaper search. So all that being said, you can take a look at the CDI collections list. So if you search for this in the Knowledge Center, and I can link it at the end also, you have your CDI collections list for Alma customers, and you can download the list from here, and it will download into an Excel file, and it looks like this. And then you can put filters on the newspaper search or any column, to take a look at it more closely. And so this is all of the collections. So, you can take a look at it and you can find them with the collection ID. That's probably the easiest way to find it, but you can filter on that and that can be very useful. In terms of what you have in your own environment as you're trying to decide, do we want to use newspaper search or not? You can use the advanced search when you're on the electronic collection index here. So if I'm in the advanced search, I can filter on electronic collection CDI newspapers, and then you can, search in your own environment for yes, newspaper search only and see what you have activated, for example, to see what content you're potentially not having in CDI if you don't have it turned on. And you can always export the lists also from Alma if you want to take a look at them, with other folks outside of the library staff. So those are all tools that can help you decide if you want to turn it on. If you do want to turn it on, we'll go through the configuration. So you'll need to make sure you have the right user role. You'll need to enable it in the Views General tab first. You'll also need to enable it in the Links menu, so it appears in the top menu. You also will need to go into the central index and proxy setup page to actually make the changes for the way that the CDI will present. And then you need to determine if you want to have featured newspapers, and I'll show that in a sec. So for this one, you just need to have the Discovery admin role again. And to configure it, we'll go back into configuration here, go back into Discovery configuration, and we'll start again in the views. So let's go into the view. And although you can turn the links on and off in each view, once you make the change in the Central Discovery Index, you're making the change basically for the entire institution. So it can't be view by view. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure that the display link to newspaper search is checked. So that's on the General tab. And what that will do is, let me just get into a regular search here. So checking that checkbox will make this appear, this newspaper search down here at the bottom, and it will also put the newspaper search in your what is this, resource type. It will give you the link to the dedicated newspaper search there also. The second thing you'll need to do is go into the links menu. And then just like we did with browse search, you'll need to make sure that the newspaper search is enabled, toggled on, and again, wherever you want it to be in your links. And then let's look at newspaper search here. So that will enable this search page to display where you can search here. Now this is your dedicated newspaper search window. And then we also have configured here featured newspapers. So there's a tile for each, and each tile can contain a single newspaper, or it can contain multiple newspapers that you want to maybe direct your users to use for certain, pieces of research. So once you've set up your view with your General tab and your Links menu tab, you'll need to go out of configuration into the regular Discovery menu here. And we're going to go into Other and then Central Index and Proxy Setup. And then don't touch anything up here. This is your PC key that publishes your holdings to CDI. But here under Search Configurations, we have Newspaper Search. So you would want this to be clicked on, and this is making that separation in CDI, taking your yes and your yes newspapers only content and putting it into that dedicated search. And then down here, the final piece for this is the featured newspapers. If you wanted to configure this, let me just look at this one here. So again, you can have as many, I think, as you want. I don't think there's a limit. And basically, you'll give it a code of your choosing, and then the name, and this name displays to your user in bold in the tile, and then the description if you want to put a description there. And then you put the ISSNs here. So you have to make sure, first of all, it has to be a newspaper that you subscribe to. And then you could put the ISSNs separated by semicolon if you are adding multiples. And you see that you can have the M dash or not. Alma doesn't seem to care. So you can have it like that or like that. And then once you have the newspaper you want to feature, you would save. And then if you'd made any changes in this page, you would need to save that. And what I was told from someone on the CDI team is that if you don't have newspapers set up and then you enable the CDI proxy, you should see results immediately. I'm sort of skeptical of that. So I would say if you don't see results, I would wait the 48 hours for the next publishing and indexing to run. And then at that point, I would check to see if you have the expected results in your newspaper search, if you're interested in that. Okay, moving on to journal search. So journal search allows you to search for journal titles by title or ISSN. You can also decide if you want to have a browse by category where you can drill into each category. And this category list is coming from the Columbia's hierarchical interface to ELSI classification. So it's a standard that is not maintained by Ex Libris, but is being borrowed here to filter journals into specific categories. The categories are coming from the 050 subfield A, the classification, and based on what this standard says, that's sorting those journals into these different categories. And this is meant to replace the A to Z journal feature. So to configure this, you need to have the correct user role, enable it in the links menu. You need to edit the link in the menu to display category browse if you want to have that browse feature enabled. And there is a job that runs that will check all of your journals for the 050 subfield A and make the sorting based on what's in that field. So that job needs to be running in order to, maintain the categories. And then you cannot change the structure of the categories, but you can change the labels if you need to. So for this one, again, you just need the discovery admin role. So let's look at the configuration for this one. So again, we're going to start in the configuration menu. We're going to start in discovery, and we're going to go into configure views, like a broken record. So I'm going to go back into my view. Okay, and so we're going to go again into the links menu, and we're going to make sure that the journal search is turned on here. So it is. Here's the journal search is toggled on. And then let me just grab it in my view. So you can just have this search bar up here, or you can turn on this journals by category. You have the option. So if you want to make sure that the category is turned on, you can go into the row action, and then we have display category browse. If you want the browse to show, you would make sure that that's checked. So basically, I mean, there's not a lot of configuration for this one just because it's using this conceived category structure. So most of the records, I will say, I think that are coming from the community zone have this 050 based on what I've seen in the sandbox environment. But you probably know your data for your local journals. But the last piece is to make sure that the job is running that's filtering the journals into these different categories. So you'll need to go out of configuration into the regular Alma environment. Alma's being very slow. And then we'll go into admin, monitor jobs here. And we're looking at our scheduled jobs. If you're familiar with looking at the scheduled jobs area, it lives in there. And I'm going to filter to discovery jobs here. Oh, I didn't choose the right one. Oh my, why are you being so slow? Okay, so there's 3 jobs here. The one we're interested in is this create journal categories file job. And it does have a schedule, and well, this is a sandbox environment, but if it had a schedule and it was toggled on, it should be running in your environment. If you had made some changes and you want to see them immediately, you could potentially run it immediately, run now. But this should be catching everything every night. So if we look again at our journals by category, so we can drill down into these different areas, and then we can see the list of the journals that are sorted into these categories. And I do have up here this is the hierarchy, and you can kind of like filter in the documentation here, and I can put this link in the chat at the end. And you can see the different categories. I don't know a ton about how this was made, but you can see the classification here, and you can take a look at how this would end up sorting your data. So the last piece of control you have over the sorting journals by category is you can change the labels. Again, the structure is set, but you do have control over the labels. So maybe there's some language that better suits your institution, and you want to change one of the labels. To reflect that, if we scroll down, there should be this journal search category labels table. You can edit that, and then you can edit any of the labels to display a different text if need be. So that's that one. And then now we're going to go into database search configuration. This one is fun. So database search configuration is similar to, it's similar in appearance to the way that the journal search category by category appears. It gives you drop downs that you can drop into and then see databases that are sorted into those categories. And then you can also search for them. It's a dedicated search page for databases. And when I say databases here, I mean the top level for your Alma collections or databases. So like your EBSCO ebooks, your ProQuest linguistics database, like the collection itself from Alma. That's what you're able to browse for with this feature. And before we go through this, I mean, view the steps and see if you want to configure this or not. Unlike some of the other features like browse search or journal search, this one requires a lot of setup up front, and it requires a lot of setup to maintain. So you want to make sure that you're truly wanting to go through with it. It also sort of goes against some of the best practices that we teach in other areas of Alma. So you'll want to, make sure that this is worthwhile to embark on and a useful feature. So first, you want to make sure that you have the correct user role. In this case, there is no predefined structure that you can use. So you at your site would determine and configure the structure that you're going to sort your databases into. You also need to decide amongst your institution a local field that will be in the actual MARC records for the collections themselves that will contain the categories that you've decided upon. So you also need to decide on a local field that you're going to use for this feature. You'll also want to consider setting up a controlled vocabulary registry because you're using the actual text in the MARC field to sort your databases into categories. So this will make sure that you don't have any typos or you're controlling what you can enter in that field that you've chosen to make sure that, everything's getting sorted properly. You need to make sure that the databases or collections that you want to be searchable are searchable. So for anybody who is familiar with the activation process for like electronic collections in Alma, we often counsel to suppress the top level descriptive bib record for the collection. And I think actually by default, when you activate a collection, you have to click the button to unsuppress it if you don't want to suppress that top level record. In this case, you'll need to have that record unsuppressed, obviously, because that's what's going to be used to display in the database search. You also need to make sure that your collection has a URL configured for linking to the actual database. Sometimes that comes from the community zone, sometimes it doesn't, and you'll need to track down that URL and put it into a field and make sure that the URL is there so that the user can actually get to that, Gale whatever database when they click on the link. You need to create the descriptive records and add the categories to the MARC field. One caveat to this is when you are editing the top level bib record, if it's coming from the community zone, you're going to need to make a local copy because of course we can't edit the records coming from the community zone. So you'll need to make a local copy and then edit that local copy. There is a job very similar to the one we just saw, and we need to make sure it's running. We need to enable it again in the links menu so we have that dedicated search. And then since you've done all this work, you can consider adding the local field that you've created to search and display so that users can also see that. Okay. Oh, actually, let me continue on. Let me just show the roles that you need. So you need a few extras for this. Discovery admin per usual. You'll also need a catalog manager or operator role for this because you'll be working in the metadata editor to actually work on the bib. And then you need the general system administrator role. So in terms of configuring this, we're going to just start in the discovery configuration menu. Oh, scratch that. We're starting in the resources configuration menu, actually. And we're going to the resources, general, other settings. So this first general other settings in the resources configuration. And this is going to be a mapping table. So the first thing we're going to do is decide what local field we're going to use. And we're looking for a certain field. So this DB underscore categories underscore field is the key that we're using. And here is where you choose the actual local mark field that you're going to use. So in this case, we've chosen 965. You should see this being blank if you haven't set up browsing by database in your system. So you're choosing which local field you're going to use, and you add it to this mapping table, and then you would save it. So that's the first piece. The second piece of this is, and I'm going to go through this kind of fast. If you have questions about this later, please let me know. This isn't really a discovery thing, but we're going to look at controlled vocabularies if you want to set that up with your local field. So if you wanted to limit what people could put in that 965 to make sure that it's accurate and there's no typos, et cetera, we could create a controlled vocabulary. So again, I'm in configuration under resources, under cataloging. We see we can create controlled vocabularies here. So when I click on that, I see the controlled vocabularies that are already here. And this one, 965AB, is the one that we've already created for database search categories. Let me just look at it. And so here is where you're actually building what you're going to put in this field. So these are the categories we've decided amongst our institution that we want to sort our databases into. And so we put them into this controlled vocabulary. This controlled vocabulary doesn't do anything until it's put into, like put on top of and limiting a certain field in the metadata configuration. So once we have this all set up, what we would do is go into, resources, same place, cataloging, and then we would go to the metadata configuration area. And here is where you can make edits to your Mark 21 bibliographic in terms of what's required and what's not and things like that. And because we want to put the controlled vocabulary into the Mark 21 bibliographic metadata profile, we'll click on it. It's remembering where I was. So I'm in the fields tab here. So I've searched for the field that I've determined I'm going to use for this, the 965. So it's already here. And let me just take a look at this. So now I'm restricting the 965 fields to only use the controlled vocabulary that I defined last time, or in the last screen rather. So here's information about the tag itself. You know, this is where you find the information about is it repeatable, etc. And then down here we have our subfields. And in this case, we're looking at the subfield A and B. You get 3 levels of hierarchy with the database categories. You can potentially also do like a C. But you see that I've chosen here from the row actions, you can edit this and you can select your controlled vocabulary that you've created. So now I'm limiting the subfield A and the subfield B of the 965 to only be able to put in values that I have predefined in my controlled vocabulary. And that going forward, if I want to, maintain this, will make sure that I don't have any miscellaneous things in the 965AB. So once we've done all of that, we are actually ready to edit the databases themselves. So what we would need to do is either, you're activating a new collection or maybe you're searching for a collection that you already have. Hello, Alma. There we go. So I'm searching in my electronic collections for Gale just to find something to use. Oh my. Okay. So let's look at this one that's active, Gale Interactive Human Anatomy. And the first thing I'll want to do is go into Edit Collection here. And okay, so this bib record is actually, it's already, oh no, it is suppressed. Okay. So per usual, generally these are activated with the top level bib suppressed. So we know that we have to unsuppress this. The other thing we have to do is we need to take a look in the, I think it's in the additional tab. Yes. So in the additional tab, we have the level URL. Sometimes you'll see something is already filled in here. It's being pulled in from the community zone collection. Sometimes there's not anything here and you'll need to, I'm just going to put a dummy URL in here. You'll need to have something here that actually points to this top level database. And likely if it's a subscription database, you'll probably also need to proxy it and select your proxy so that your user can actually get to it. So once you have your URL saved, we can save this. And then we're actually going to need to go into the metadata editor to edit the record. So here is the collection we were working with. And go away. And we're looking at the descriptive record here. So I went into the ellipses under descriptive record for this collection. Here's the bib. I actually need to edit it. So I'm going to click on edit to pull it up in the metadata editor. And I am using the old metadata editor today just because I want to make sure that I'm able to copy it to catalog. I need to research more about how to do that in the new version. Let it load. But we do know that this bib record is coming from the community zone, so we'll need to make a local copy before we're able to edit it once it opens. Okay. So we see that we can't make any edits to it because this is a community zone record. So I'll need to go into File, and then the first thing I'll do is copy it to the catalog, make a local copy. The next thing I'll also need to do is go into Tools, and I'll need to unsuppress this record from Discovery because we know that we need to have it discoverable. Did that actually work? Yes. And then the last thing we'll need to do while we're here in the bib record is we need to actually add the 965 and put our categories into it. So I'm going to need to, come on, Alma. I'm going to need to add a field. So I'm adding my 965. And then I know that I put my controlled vocabulary on my subfield A and my subfield B. So if I start typing anything in here, I get my list up here. So I'm restricted into what I can put in here, and I'm making this up. I'm not. This probably are completely unuseful categories for this particular journal, but we'll just put some in. Okay, so now we have our categories. The record is unsuppressed and it's copied to the catalog. Finally, we can save and release this record. So the last thing we have to do is make sure that the job runs so that we can sort this journal into the correct category. So I'm in the regular non-config menu under admin, monitor jobs, and then we'll have to go to the same scheduled jobs area and take a look at our discovery jobs. And I'm actually going to run it and hopefully it will run quickly. And the database that I just worked on will end up displaying. Okay. Go into discovery here. And then we have creates DB categories file. It is turned on. I am going to run it now just to try and catch the thing that I just edited. And hopefully it will run quickly. That's today. Yeah, it looks like it's set. So let me show you what the database search looks like. So we see we don't have a ton of categories because I'm still building this. So every time I save a bib, depending on what I've chosen, I'm building the database based on what's actually put into those bibs. And some of them have, subcategories. So this would be the subfield A, this is the subfield B. It's building that structure. And when you click into it, then you can see this is the top level. So this is the Gale Cengage Shakespeare collection periodicals. And then we can get to the actual top level collection here. And then you can also search by database name. I don't even remember the one that I just did. It was also Gale. Okay, so this one, human anatomy. So now this record has been put also into the database search. So again, it's a lot of work to set up, and it's potentially a lot of work to maintain, because as you go forward with your activations, if you wanted to sort these into database search, you would want to do this process where you would, make a copy of the bib and add the 965, et cetera, et cetera. So it's possible, and I don't know, you can let me know if you've set it up and you find it useful. But it is a bit of overhead, obviously. Okay, so moving on. And by the way, the slideshow also shows screenshots for all of these steps. I don't show the screenshots, obviously, because I'm demoing. But if you want to grab the PowerPoint presentation, you can take a look at all the steps that I did. And again, I'll post the recording and I will put timestamps in so that you're able to navigate to all of these different configs when you're ready to set them up. Okay, so we'll take a look. This is the last search interface we're going to look at, and then we'll look at the last two pieces. So this is collection discovery. We saw this previously. It's relatively new. It's a way to sort of visually display collections that you want to, sort of handpick and display in your institution. It was made to work really well with Alma D if you have that, but you don't have to have Alma D to use it. I think you can also use Rosetta with it if you have a Rosetta subscription. So you can show thumbnails from your actual images if you are storing the digital objects in Alma. But if you're not, you can use bib records and you can make it look pretty with thumbnails and images. So for this, you need to make sure that you have the correct user role. You'll need to go into the Manage Collections area and you'll need to, again, decide on what collections and subcollections you're going to set up. And then enable it in the View again, and in the General tab. And so there are a few extra roles that you need. So again, Discovery Admin, but there's also a specific role, Collection Inventory Operator, that allows you, or Collection Inventory Operator Extended, that allows you to work with the collections. The Inventory Operator Extended shows you all of the options that you have, and you can also move and edit and delete collections and sub-collections. So that might be useful if you're going to be working with it sort of extensively. And then you need the Digital Inventory Operator to potentially add, remove titles from a collection. So to set that up, and just to show before we get into the config, again, this is what it looks like. And you have your tiles moving around, and then you can add different images. And these are not the best images. You'd probably want to, spend some time making sure that they displayed the way you wanted to. But this is a top level collection. You can put titles right under this top level collection, or you can define sub collections, which I've done here. So you have fiction books and nonfiction books under your digital books. Now I'll just go into one. So these are digital objects, I think. And then these are just bib records that have been pulled in. And then you can have thumbnails, add thumbnails here that look better than these, and sort of display it nicely. So if you do want to configure that, we'll need to go into resources. So this is not the config menu. This is the regular resources menu. You should see manage inventory, manage collections. You'll see this if you have the collection inventory operator or the operator extended. And when you click into that, you are defining the top level collections, and then you can define sub collections underneath. So let me just look at the digital books one we were just looking at. And this one isn't too cumbersome to configure. You'll need to define for your collection a name that displays, and a description that also displays on that tile, and define the library that you're pulling your records from. And then in this case, I have two sub-collections that live underneath this main collection. So I don't have any titles under this main collection, but you could do it that way. So let's look at the sub-collection. So you just kind of drill down. It's the same menu for the sub-collection. And then here I actually do have titles pulled into here. And then you can add titles from your repository. So it just opens up a repository search and you can search for the things that you already have in your Alma environment. You could create a set. So you could, do some search and save your query and then add them all in a set. And then you can sort of move them around as need be. And then in this discovery tab here, you have options to sort your titles. And then here's where you can add all of your thumbnails here. And then I think you can link them to the title list once you've uploaded additional images. So, that's sort of how you manage that. And then you can have, I think it's 3 levels. So you can have additional sub-collections underneath this sub-collection. And then you can sort of just, you can define images at each level so that it displays in the tile. Let me go back to the digital books one. So there's an image that's in the top level, and then there's images that are in the sub levels also. So you can define those. So let's see, was there anything else I needed to say about that? Oh, let me just also show. So if you do end up setting this up and you put your bib records into different collections, what you will see also in the full record details is Alma will add this collection path. So it's showing that it's part of a collection, and then it will show the, the thread to under which umbrella it lives. And then you could pull up the collections from there also. Okay. So this is the last search interface we'll talk about. This is a quick one to configure. Moving on to tags. So we've seen tags before. It's really simple. It's just a way that your patrons or staff can assign tags to records, and then you can search on them and filter on them, and you can delete your own. So if a Primo user is logged in, they can see any tags that are on that record, and if they are the creator, they can delete them. If not, they can use them to see other records that have been tagged that way. And then I'll show you how you can manage your tags in Alma, because likely you'll need to do some ongoing configuration. You'll need to make sure you have the correct role, enable it in the links menu, and then again, ongoing, you'll need to end up managing those tags. So for this one, you just need the discovery admin role. And let's just look at the tag search since we're already here. So here's the tags, and then I can click into it and see the records that were tagged that way. So it does use it in a search to pull them up. And then let's just look at this one, see what tags it has. So this one has field guides and mushroom identification, and then it's easy as this to add. Just pulling this from the subject. It's easy enough to add another one, and then I can delete this one easily by just clicking on the X, but I didn't create these, so I'm not able to delete those. So that's really the extent of the functionality. To set it up in Primo V, you need to go to your, we need to go to the configuration area, go into discovery, and again, we're going to go into configure views. There we go. Go back into my view here. And then under the links menu, you'll just need to make sure that tags are enabled here. So make sure that it's turned on, and again, showing in the place that you want. And just to show you too, in the full record services, so when you actually open up the record, this is where you see tags. There's no there's no row action button to edit this, but you can move it up and down to change the place that it appears in the actual full record. So that's it in terms of configuration. In terms of managing the tags in the discovery menu, under the same display configuration area, you should have manage tags here. It doesn't have like, it's not a super descriptive list, but these are the tags that have been added. This apparently does not correspond to a actual patron ID. I'm not sure exactly what this number is supposed to represent. So it's sort of anonymized in here, but you can see what tags, how many records represent this tag, and you don't link out to the records here in Alma. Basically, you can just delete them if like, if this is an inappropriate tag or, you don't want to have it in the database, you can just delete it from here, or delete them in bulk. So that's kind of the refinement that you have in terms of managing those ongoing. Okay. So I'm gonna skip topic overview for now to make sure I have enough time to talk about resource recommender, and I'll return to it if I have time. So I do want to show resource recommender because I think that you'll find use in it in the time that we're in and ongoing. What resource recommender can do is you can determine if a user searches a specific term like linguistics. So if a user searches for the term linguistics or library hours, for example, you can have Primo pull up either suggested databases, suggested websites, or library information, which I know is always useful, and you can link out to your institution's homepage, and then you can put a description in here that's actually showing the library hours. You can also link out to library guides like a libguide. If you didn't want to integrate it, you can still have the link there to make it very useful. You can also have certain terms link out to a person. So you can have the information for a suggested librarian email address or something like that, if they're an expert perhaps in that area. So if you want to configure this, you need to make sure that you have the right user role, configure the resources that you want to recommend. Oh, that's it. And then you just need the discovery admin role for this one. So again, let me see. So for resource recommender, we are in the discovery config menu, and under other down here, other, sort of the last column, we have resource recommender configuration. And there's a predefined list. So here's database, library guide, website, person, and then there's some custom ones that you can work with. So there's actually quite a few. And this is not limited to a single database, as we'll see as we get into it. You can recommend multiple databases for multiple different search terms. So let me just edit this one. So basically what you have in this row list is you've given a key to the database, and it doesn't really matter what the key is as long as it's unique. And then you have the name that's displaying to users and potentially a description here. And then these tags are the search that actually brings up this resource. So just to like demonstrate, so opera is a search term, a tag in this row that's going to pull up the ProQuest Music and Performing Arts collection. So if I'm in my library in any scope and I search for opera, I will get this suggested database and potentially again a suggested website depending on how you've configured it. So let's just look at one of them. So again, we have a key here and it just needs to be unique. And then the name is the name that displays to users. And then the tag is actually going to be the search term that pulls up this database. So it usually uses the name of the database itself. It like predefines that, but you can erase that if you don't want to have PubMed pull up PubMed Central. And then you can add, of course, additional search terms that are going to pull up PubMed Central in that top bar. And then you have the link, and then you can change the text that says go to database. You can change how that appears here. If it's coming from the link resolver, you'll see that the link is coming from the uResolver, and then you don't need to do anything. You can just rely on the Alma link resolver in that case. And then you can potentially choose which views this applies to. I also just want to show the, let me go back, the library hours one, because we also have a nice example for some COVID information. Let's see, I think it's this one, library information. So the configuration screens are a little different depending on what you're configuring, entering a person's name and email, database, etc. But we have the search hours, library hours are open, pulling up this library hours information along with a link to the page. And then we have the description that's actually showing the library hours. And then similarly, we're pulling up a URL for COVID, coronavirus, etc., pulling up just some information there about that at our local institution. So you could configure that. When I search for COVID, I get the CDC website and then our local Ex Libris guide for COVID-19. And then the same thing, if I searched for hours here, I get this little banner with the link to the institution's homepage and also some information about the hours. So I just think that this is a really useful way to highlight information that your user might not be getting from the search results. And of course, the search results appear below. So if they were looking for, scholarly articles on COVID, they would also get those appearing in the search result list also. So here we see the description is defined. These are the searches that are pulling this up. We have a link here, and then the link text is showing that we're bringing it to the Ex Libris institution homepage. So, okay, let me just show the final slides. And again, I will try and post the, what are they called? The number, the timestamp for each of these configurations, because I know we went through a lot of them in this hour. Again, reminding you about premium services if you're interested in that. And the slideshow is available for you, and you can also link out to these resources at the end. And again, it has screenshots of all of the demo. So if that's an easier way to go through it, you can of course do that as well. And let me stop sharing so that I can post all those links into the chat for you. So I'm just going to put where you can find the recordings. And it might take a little bit longer to get the recording up to do the time stamping. And again, you can find the slides there as well. And I'm sure there were some questions. Hopefully they were able to be answered. I don't want to run over. It looks like we have a few minutes left. I don't know if there's anything, Milan, that I should address, or if we can give people couple more minutes left. I appreciate everybody sticking with me. I know it's a lot of information in 1 hour, but hopefully, again, this will be a useful resource when you're going back to actually make these configurations. So if not, we'll see you again next week. Oh, there was a question of, will we review the topic that I skipped, the topic review? Yes, I will make a note to revisit that in a session where I don't have so much information. So, all right, thanks everybody. I am going to grab the chat again since I wasn't able to look at it during the session, and we can address the rest later. Have a great day. Thanks again for attending.